So I have to make a decision tonight, and you will know the decision I made because this video will come out before that video does. But I have to decide whether tomorrow, in what could be my last, well, what should be my last ever Thursday Live, if everything goes to plan from here, what video do I want to do? You see, part of me thinks it's the right time, it's the right period I should do how Dunkirk impacted on D-Day. How the lessons in Dunkirk affect D-Day. That would be the sensible thing to do. That would be going with the zeitgeist. That would be going with what's in the period and what's everything else. But I want to do something. There's part of me which is tempted to do something about the wooden walls. Because this little office, this little wooden office of mine has been my home as I grew this channel. This has been my office now for years. And it feels really weird to talk about it like this because I built this office. Yes, it was officially first built by builders and they did such a terrible job that me and Drachenfeld basically rebuilt it. And when I say me and him, he helped a huge amount. But when it came to the internal walls and large chunk of the external walls, that was mostly me on my own. Because I could do that on my own. Roof, I needed him for. Concrete, I needed his help with because that was a two-person job. But he had his own life, had his own thing. So I rebuilt everything. And this shelving, both in here and out, and my sister's office, entirely built by me from what was left over by the builders because I couldn't add it in anywhere else. So yeah, I might well not go with the popular thing. I might go with wooden walls rather than anything I should do sensibly. And that's not even the strangest thing I've got to think about today, because when this video comes out, I will know, potentially, whether I'm off for Scandi shit 2024 or not. Because we started fundraising basically the 29th of May. And I have to leave. I have to be aboard. If I'm going, I have to get on the plane on the 14th of June. So less than 2 weeks to raise the money we need. And while some of my colleagues are, and I'm thankful for this because it makes it still possible, do have the money on credit cards, etc., they can afford to go without it. I, of course, middle of moving, cannot. And that's fine, because I've organised it all, so if I can't go, they will still have the museums to go to. Everything will be set up for them. Everything will be organised. And I'll just be able to concentrate on moving. I'd like to go down. It's going to be a cool trip. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be a lot of cool naval history. And this year, of course, everything's been delayed by so many things. We discussed that on this site. There's a full explanation of all the stuff that's happened since Australia. And I've already gone into it on the IGN Doctrine and Carrier Form Shikaku class video. So, yeah, I'm not too worried about explaining that too much here, but yeah, so I'm starting this video, and I'm both talking about stuff which will have been in the past when it comes out, and stuff which will be in the future when it comes out, or possibly ongoing when it comes out. There's a link down below. For Scandinavia, the trips, I think it's 16 grand we're trying to raise for 5 of us to go to Scandinavia, because we need to take a chemist with us if we want to blow stuff up. It'll be fun. It'll be fun. But that's not the purpose of Scuttlebutt, is it? Scuttlebutt is to go through, as I said before, the comments, which aren't done on key ship videos. I don't think about any from the key ships. May occasionally nick some from the key ships and key aircraft, but shouldn't do, because they're going to get their own comment response videos. They always get comment response videos through Christmas. And I'm starting to record those the moment I get back from this trip. If you are all kind enough to support us enough that I can go, yeah, that will be done. That'll be part of that. And they will be coming out the whole way through the Christmas period, because every year for Christmas period, for about roughly 80 days, I try and make sure that there's a comment response video going live, and a regular video going live, or a live video, and there's also a short every day. So there are 3 videos a day going up for that period, because I've lost too many friends in the Christmas period. And some people find watching YouTube, new videos come out, I'll watch this video, and then I'll watch another video, and I'll watch another video, and it gets them through. It gets them to the point at which they no longer want to carry on that thing. And I rather like the idea that if they're not putting enough new videos out there, helps even one person once, then that's worth me doing it year in, year out, every single year, as far as I'm concerned. It's not for the views. It's for a view. Anyway, though, there does seem to be a theme coming up in some of the comments. So, from Jim Cat, my God, you narrate so slowly, I couldn't get through this because I kept getting impatient waiting for you to say something relevant. That is, I think, from Tillman's Maximum Battleships. I narrate so slowly. That's because I'm not narrating. Would probably make it slightly easier, but when I read, I tend to read fast when I'm reading out loud. Again, it's a product of my particular version of dyslexia. It's associated with us. One of the key things you can use to spot a short-term memory dyslexic, i.e. someone without that part of their brain functioning properly. They tend to read out loud very quickly because they're worried they're going to forget the word. This is because they're trying to run it through their long-term memory, but the long-term memory really doesn't have time to pick it, so they literally are trying to read very quickly, and it takes a lot of effort for us to read slowly. Which is why I don't tend to read speeches or narrate. I have bullet points, and I hit them, and I talk them through. That makes me slow down a bit, and makes my words actually intelligible to human sound. So, yeah, it might go sometimes a bit further, but that's because I want to make sure I give you the right words. And make sure I convey what I want to convey. Now, then Charles Morris. Dr. Clarke, I respect both you and a few others. That's nice. But I get bored quickly with your presentations. One off topic too much like the hair. Mine is farther gone and gets shaved in the summer. I think you're talking about a live, and I'm sorry I was shocked. I just realised it when I looked at myself in the camera. I don't tend to look at myself in the mirror that often. That might sound strange, but literally it's just quickly comb, make sure everything's neat, and then run out. And it's sometimes when you're looking in the camera, you suddenly go, oh! Too much time to single hellos and dead air. Well, that was a live, so I was chatting to people. I think it was a Battleships, actually. I find in some of your videos, I need to double the speed to keep my attention. Glad I didn't have you for history classes. Would have put me to sleep. That's honestly never happened in my actual classes, because guess what? Guess what? Whilst YouTube I use the skills I use while lecturing and teaching, it's not done the same way. For example, when I'm saying hellos to people, people turn up at different times, and I try and be polite, especially when they join the chat, because I like to recognise the people who are taking part, taking part and taking the time to interact. It's nice. It's nice for me, and while I can do it, and when I can see them, to say thank you. I think it's polite, especially in a live where I'm like Battleships, where I'm taking questions. But that's because that's more like a seminar. don't take this the wrong way, but in a lecture it's a very different scenario. For starters, the doors lock. In some universities, in others they stay open, but there is a requirement. Secondly, most students realize, do not come into my classes late. You will get sarcasm. I have no qualms and no limits. There will be sarcasm. Don't let your phone go off. Again, there will be more sarcasm. In simple terms, quite a lot of my students have written variations over the years of Dr. Clarke is like Dr. Cox when I am lecturing. So, and before people sort of find that rude or intrusive, remember, when I am lecturing, I will adopt a different personality when I'm teaching online than when I'm interacting with 10 students, 20 students, one-on-one, or 600 or 1,000 students. It's a different style. It's a different personality. It's a different way. You bring out different parts of yourself. For one thing, I have to say, in person, no one has ever complained they can't hear me. No one has ever said I'm too quiet. And I have no idea with this video, because the system, I have checked the settings. Drac has checked the settings. Since the last update, the volume has gone up, but now sometimes it's too loud. And I have no idea why this is. I think in the end, once I've moved house, one of the things I'm going to do if I get some downtime is completely wipe the machine and reinstall the operating system and everything from scratch, and just rebuild it all entirely. And maybe that will fix the issue. Maybe it will. But I don't know. I don't know. So, hopefully that gets that. But it also might turn it back to being quiet again. And, oh, good Lord, I don't want that. So, yeah. And also, I would say, people going to sleep in my classes never happened. Never. There are some lecturers they might try that on, but you don't do that in mine. I'm nice, I make sure the coffee cart is outside the door when I have an 8 AM start of the lecture, but you better not go to sleep. So this is Scuttlebutt 2. Okay, there's already been Scuttlebutt 1. And I would say two things about this. One, you will certainly see more of my personality in Scuttlebutts. If you have been at any point thinking you haven't been seeing my true personality, you're definitely going to be seeing it in full. And one of the things I often find strange, people, with some of the perspectives that I get on this channel is, yes, I'm an academic, yes, I'm a university lecturer, but I have a different style when I'm in a suited, booted, lecturing in a university than when I'm at home talking history and going through these things and these subjects in a t-shirt, sometimes with a hat on, sometimes without, and my tracky bottoms and and just sitting here comfy, chatting with all of you. I suppose in a way, if I was going to put it by anything, one of my academic inspirations did a whole series of recorded videos that he put together as fireside chats. And that was how he structured them. They were literally him recording them at home by his fireside. And they were put together in I think it was during the sort of 60s. That's when he sort of recorded them up. And they were audio lectures. And I have listened to those. And if I was going to pick any person who's in sort of whose style I've sort of in many way followed for structuring how I am on my channel, it's that. Because for me, that was a wonderful way of inviting someone into the subject. Because it was inviting them into you. And sort of come, yes, I'm an academic. Yes, I'm a university lecturer. Yes, I have letters after my name, before my name, all those things. But I'm not here as that. I'm here as someone who knows a lot about history, who has spent a lot of time researching it, studying it, and I want to share my love of that history with you. So no, I don't want to be my academic persona. I don't want to be the person who takes attendance and is going to be with the students if they walk in late and are therefore ruining for interrupting everyone else who's paid and who's got there on time. You're walking into that lecture and being and ruining. If you have a good reason, if you come in and go, sorry, I'm 5 minutes late, the bus was late, please take a seat, don't worry. But, you know, if you walked in lecture theatre and it's an hour into a 2 hour lecture, you walk in and go, oh sorry, I slept in. Oh, you better be ready for what's coming. That's going to start off with something along the lines of Sleeping Beauty, and it's going to go downhill from there. But that's not the persona I want to put on the channel, and that's not the way I treat people on YouTube. You're not paying $9,000 or whatever the various sums that you're paying a year for university education in the UK. You're not, and the other people aren't as well. It's very kind what everyone does to support the channel, watching videos, etc. But it's a different approach. Okay, this is me at home, talking to you, and talking to everyone, as if you're all in my home with me, chatting away. And I hope that style is acceptable. I hope people like that, but I don't want to use the other style, because that would be like doing work from home. And it's bad enough when I have to do online lecturing. I don't mind it, I do it. If any employers are watching this, no, I do it fine. But it's always a bit weird. Especially when after years of training that you are not supposed to even be in whenever you're in even in office space, if you're on your own with students, you have the door open and you make sure they stand closer to the door than you, so that you are not blocking them in. And now we've got them. We have online teaching sometimes, and they're in their bedrooms. This just worries me. It worried me during COVID when I was in my bedroom. I was very happy when I got out here to an office. One of the reasons why I love this place. Shameless book plug. Goes into every single video. Why? Because it matters. Because thank you to everyone who likes, shares, and subscribes to videos. Thank you to everyone who watches the videos. It's always fun to sort of interact with you all, and I hope you enjoy them. But, as mentioned, I'm an academic. And in the UK, we are promoted. It's not publish or perish. It's worse. Publish or be forgotten. And, oh, by the way, we don't take any notice of YouTube channels. We don't take any notice of anything else you do other than books and journal articles. So, I publicize my books, because it's the only way I'm going to get enough out there. And it's thanks to all of you and your support for this channel that I have the money to research and write more books, because research funding is terrible for history, especially modern history. So thank you to everyone who's a patron or a Ko-fi supporter and helping me with my Iron Brew supply. And thank you to people who are members of the channel. Thank you. It means a lot to me. So let's get into the full strength comments. Oh, yes, this one. Smart academics. This was from... Who was it from? Oh, yes. Courier. Dr. Clarke posed the question, why do people ignore Italy's World War II efforts? I think what he really meant is, how come we smart academics keep telling you how great Italy's World War II performance was, and you dummies don't listen? The reason is because academics are being silly, and your readers, reviewers are too polite to point us out. Oh, Caribra, thank you for saying this, because I'm going to have fun. For 50 years, the Italian military performance was treated with complete contempt. By who? Was that anyone who actually fought them? Then a revisionist trend started. The intention was focused on things that Italy did well in World War II. This was necessary revision, but in nature of these things, the pendulum swung too far, and academics seem to have lost sight of the central fact of Italy's World War II performance. It mostly sucked. Oh, sorry, this is going bad for you. Dr. Clarke's video seems to be a prime example. He valorized in the sub-mediocre performance of Regia Aeronautica. The SM-79 sank 4 destroyers in 3 years. Are these really good results? The Luftwaffe sunk 7 British cruisers and 36 destroyers. The Japanese, with Nels and Bettys, about the same range and bomb loaded as the SM-79, but slower, nasty tendency bursting flames, sank a battleship, a battlecruiser, a heavy cruiser, and a destroyer in 1942. I say the RA underperformed. The Regia Aeronautica underperformed. We need to bring analysis of Italy's World War II back into balance. We need to bring back the suck. Well, honestly, if I'm going to respond to this, I have to rein in some of my natural sarcasm, because, honestly, pretty rude. Because I don't think I've ever come across a smart academics dummies. That's definitely not my phrase. Considering the amount of times I point out that the reason, if you want a PhD, get a PhD, but the thing is, what you need a PhD for is some very specific things. If you want it in terms of history, I got it because I needed it for the research skills, but also because I have dyslexia, and I needed to be able to counterbalance the people who are going, dyslexics can't do anything. And literally, there are people who say that. There were literally people in my own PhD course who would tell me that to my face. There were people at school who told me I couldn't get anywhere because of having my dyslexia, that I wouldn't even be able to go to university or accept to university, let alone get a PhD. I got a PhD out of stubbornness, honestly. So I'm never going to say it's smart academics and we're dummies. It's just not the way. I'd also point out that a lot of the people writing this stuff are not academics. There have been a lot of very good historians and people who are very focused on history, but a lot of them come from different backgrounds than academics, and mostly a large chunk of the revision has come from actually getting hold of the Italian sources. This is going to sound revolutionary, but people actually reading the Italian sources, matching them up with the English language sources and going, oh, that thing we've been ignoring for years because we didn't think it happened. It actually happened. Or alternatively, starting to remember there were more than just the Germans involved. And that the German account is not necessarily always accurate, because the Germans are very good at forgetting their allies were involved. Incredibly good at it. Now, you use the word suck a lot, so, well, I'm not going to go with the joke that could come from that, but might I suggest that you're kind of upset, you're kind of focused on it. Just, maybe think of a different word. But you're also kind of you're not putting the data in context. And I can understand this because probably, judging from your approach, you haven't looked at the wider context or thought about it. I hate to say this to people, but honestly, your reading seems to suggest that, because you are going into this and going, right then, so the Regia Aeronautica should achieve the same levels with their aircraft as the Japanese and as the Luftwaffe. Well, for example, if we use the sinking of Fawcett, of Repulse and Prince of Wales. No aircraft carrier with them, no AA cruisers, 2 capital ships out on their own, some destroyers, no fighter cover at all was called in because as they understood, there wasn't available, and the bombers basically had a free run at the ships. If we use the Luftwaffe as an example, well, they didn't just attack British operations in the Mediterranean, they were also the Bay of Biscay, they were also the East Coast convoys, North Sea, West Coast, North Atlantic, and Arctic. So that's kind of a wider range. If we consider some of the convoys they ran up against, they had a lot of escorts, and some of them had very few escorts. Alright. But there's a lot more shipping as well for them to attack, so they have a lot more targets. So they are attacking, they are fighting over a far wider area, they have more targets. Then we consider the number of aircraft they have dedicated to this role. The Germans have more than the Regia Aeronautica do. The Regia Aeronautica, the Savio Machetti SM-79 Spavios, they are involved in a huge amount of operations. A huge amount of operations, and doing lots of things outside of the anti-shipping operation. So it's actually a very small number of their total number of aircraft are actually assigned to the role. And when we consider the convoys going to Mediterranean, some of those convoys had as many as 4 aircraft carriers with them. So they had long-range fighters from operating from land bases, things like the Beaufighter. They had to contend with. They had fairly concentrated fighters and combat air patrols over the convoys they're trying to attack. Then they're running into destroyers, sloops, AA cruisers, the heavy A from the aircraft carriers and the capital ships involved in it. And, let's be honest, HMS Nelson several times in her life decided that 16-inch shells were useful as anti-aircraft weapons, and at least one time hit something. It was described as the aircraft seemed to be split down the middle and the wings folded in. And that's pretty much the effect of a 16-inch shell running into it. That's not a good scenario. So they've got to deal with all of that. So you're saying that in one of the toughest environments for them to actually score a kill, their limited number still scored this many attacks and still impacted this level. Because also, the fact is, the British turn up with those convoys are not as regular. They're not almost running around almost every day. They're not turning up on a weekly basis. They are spread out. They are inconstant. So yeah, if we put it into context, and if you wanted to do those comparisons, the Regia Aeronautica stack up pretty darn well. I know it's a current go-to phrase in the zeitgeist to say that academics are being rude to people and looking down on people, and I'm sorry that some people in the wider profession are like that. I really don't like it. And I would never belong to that group. Because it just wouldn't be me. Some of the best historians I know have no formal training at all. And some of the worst historians I know also have a PhD. Doesn't mean a thing. But the reason this re-examination has happened is because of the context of the war. And also, there is a general problem with the Mediterranean as a whole, as a theatre. It is incredibly ignored. And I think what you're picking up on here is also that the Mediterranean has been getting more and more attention recently. There have been people looking at it. There have been people examining it. And I have to say, this Scuttlebutt, I'm probably going to re-examining some of the histories and some of the things we've been taught. Because some of the things we've been taught by popular culture, by some of the popular is wrong. It is wrong. I'd also say another quite major issue for the Regia Aeronautica was the level of their relationship with the Regia Marina, but that's a whole other kettle of fish, because that was supposed to be a perfect relationship, because the guy who was Air Minister was also the Minister of the Navy. And that was Fat Boy Fun Boy, the less improved World War II edition, aka Mussolini. Yes, he was the person who brought together both roles. So, right then. let's get on to our next topic. AEW, Airborne Early Warning. There's a Royal Navy problem. Lack of AWACS is what cost the Royal Navy so many lives and ships in the Falklands. 42 years later, they still haven't fixed it. My response to that was the Merlin Crow's Nest and the Sea King system before it have both been pretty good and often in demand. Are they as good as Hawkeye? Probably not, but they support British operations and provide a capability that can operate from the Royal Navy's carriers. Now, fight for a global First Amendment continued here, which was it's the altitude problem and range problem. Being helicopter based, its inability to get high enough, accompanied by range constraints, and the fact that the array is so much smaller means it's not just inferior, it's dangerously inferior to fix their wing AWACS. The fact that the Queen Elizabeth class lacks the ability to operate them and the USN, People's Liberation Army, Navy, and especially the Marine Nationale can and do, is, in my opinion, a national disgrace and embarrassment. Small issue. If you go check, the People's Liberation Army Navy might have plans to, in the future, operate such aircraft. But currently, like the Russians, their airborne early warning is Kamov K-31s, which they have 9 of, and some Changhe Z-18s, or the Z-8G as well, which is also a helicopter-based airborne early warning. Their fixed-wing airborne early warning are land-based aircraft. Now, how am I going to carry that on from? Because this was, of course, the airborne early warning aircraft and the curvature of the Earth. It's a little short. And it's one of the first times I'm doing this comment in response to quite a short comment, I think. Now, I understand a lot of people's ire over this issue. But the helicopter airborne early warning is actually quite useful in certain niche areas, so it is useful. One of those is if you want to monitor spaces like like Norway and Scandinavia and mountainous areas. Airborne early warning, helicopter based, can be useful because it can position itself. Now, I do agree there are some limits in terms of range, etc. But one of the things you have to remember is separate AWACS, airborne, from airborne early warning, because AWACS is slightly different. AWACS stands for Airborne Warning and Control System, and it's about forward aviation control. And this is one of the major advantages of the fixed-wing systems which the Americans primarily and the French, due to buying the American systems, can implement and can utilize. Now, with the Royal Navy's helicopter-based systems, they can do that to an extent, but it's not really part of their primary gamut. Why? Whilst they have some level of control, they cannot keep up with the strike aircraft, so you're not going to expect them to. They are about airborne early warning. That is their primary. They're part about the air defense at sea. And for that, they are a perfectly fine utility. This is one of those scenarios where I think history would be remembering things very differently if they had existed prior to the Falklands War. If they hadn't gone down with Illustrious, if they had been available to go down with Invincible and with Hermes. Because A, lives wouldn't have been lost, a lot of lives would have been saved in the Falklands War, and that's a very true statement, and one of the reasons why I'm agreeing with you as much as I am. But also, like the Sea Harrier, which was widely pilloried at the time as not being a very good aircraft, and now I'm usually dealing with people going, we should have kept the Sea Harrier upgraded instead of the F-35, because it was better. No, it wasn't. It's a very good aircraft for its period, but it's not. It's I've got into that discussion before. What it'd be remembered therefore is it'd be remembered as a great system which saved ships, which was integral to the air defense of the fleet. And people would have a thing of going, well, yes, it's not, but it's war-proven. And it was capable, and it did this and did that. Instead, where it has shone is in Iraq, is in the various Gulf Wars. It has shone in Afghanistan and other scenarios where it's been used. And it has been incredibly useful. Now, would I have liked the Royal Navy to have Catabar carriers? and have therefore the full gamut of systems. Well, that's a problematic one for me. You see, the original plan had something along the lines of the replacements for Ocean and Albion and Bulwark and probably Argus and these ships was going to be LHDs. Going to be ships which would have meant you'd have roughly 4 to 5 flight decks. Hopefully, if you'd replaced the free amphibs with free amphibs, you would have had 5 flight decks. And yes, they'd have all been Vistal, but you'd have had 5 flight decks that could all take the same range of aircraft. So could all operate the same airborne early warning aircraft, could all operate the same fighter, could all operate the same range of helicopters. And yes, 2 are strike fleet carrier configured, and 3 are the amphib configured. But they could do the other role in a pinch if they needed to. Now, for a medium power, that would be a very sensible system. That would have been an absolutely exceptionally sensible system. So, of course, it hasn't been done. That system would, to me, have justified Vistal and everything. Completely, far and away. And anyone who then turned around and went, oh no, it would have been better to have Cadabar, I go, well, look, and how many flight decks are you going to get in the British budget? How much money are you going to award to carrier air systems? Because you would need an entirely separate, different carrier group. You might not be able to get the LHDs as well. Is it worth having, let's say, free Cadabar carriers and not having the LHDs? For Britain as a medium power, for a global medium power, which likes to project around the world, that group would have made sense. That would have made a very sensible formation. You would have built your task groups around a carrier battle group, an amphibious task group, and you would be able to deploy usually both as your task force. So you'd have a carrier battle group centered on a carrier, amphibious task group centered on an LHD, with probably an LSL as well, a couple of LSLs as well, maybe a second LHD along if you're really lucky, and that's your deployable force. And that's good. For medium power, that would mean a lot of capability. And oh, by the way, the aircraft can jump off either. So if you need to project more of a stronger cap over the amphibious task group, don't worry. Your fighters can launch from your carrier and they can refuel, rearm on the LHD, so they don't need to come all the way back to the carrier. And vice versa. An airborne early warning cannot be operating from both. And you probably would have a contingent of AEW. Let's say if you did have 2 LHDs, probably one of them would have, instead of 8 fighters, would have 16 fighters and 4 AEW aircraft as part of their air group. And so you'd have that with one of the LHDs, and have the rest of the fighter strength and the airborne early warning, the carrier battle group, and that would work. That would have been a great idea. That was a very sensible, a very clearly clever doctrine, and a very sensible idea for a medium power to go. Because added to that, you've also had the Royal Air Force operating the same F-35Bs, and so if you need to surge more F-35Bs to an area, like we did in the Falklands with the Harriers and all those things, you could. And that would have been such a good idea. And yet, that idea gets watered down and moved around and changed and until you don't see that idea. And then you're left with the thing of, do we do the Cadabar conversion? The trouble is, by that point, it was too late in the carrier designs. Yes, we can in theory do the conversions. Yes, we can do the work. And yes, there are work going on today looking at various options for installing a whole range of systems, from a system which really suits UAVs and UCAVs to a system which could suit optionally crewed aircraft. All those things are being looked at. Will it actually happen? I have no idea. But I can tell you this, and I will tell you this happily. It would have been far more sensible to have had 3 major docks, 3 minor docks, and 5 flight decks as your pool, as your core of expeditionary forces for Britain in the capabilities of global reach, than it is to have just 2 flight decks and whatever we get for the MSS, the multi-role support ship. I would love to say that we have managed to realize that we are not living in a war of choice era, that we're not living in peace. And there's a great line I was watching on West Wing the other day where the Admiral, Fitzwallace, who's chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that's his character I know, says he can no longer tell when it's peace or war anymore. The world is that complicated, he can no longer tell when it's peace or war. I would say that is the reality we are going to be living in. And that's not a normal reality. That's the problem. That was actually the normality for much of the period of human history. We have been indulged by the neatness of the Cold War and by what happened in a post-Cold War environment into believing that the world is naturally peaceful, at peace, and everyone has these nice little boxes and lines they stick to. It doesn't. And so, fight for a global First Amendment? I agree. Those fixed-wing AWACS are better. But I am still happy to have the helicopter-based airborne early warning because I prefer to have that than nothing. And that's a lot better than nothing. I'm fairly sure the future of airborne early warning is uncrewed aircraft. Absolutely certain, in fact. And I'll be very interested to see what happens in that role. Whether they go rotary or whether they go fixed wing and how they adapt the air carriers to that system. I'll be very interested. But I would also say this. One of the problems we're dealing with is that our politicians and leaders around the world in many nations have been running a peacetime approach to procurement in a period where you can no longer tell when it's peace or war. A time when you can no longer really say, we are at peace. You can say when you're at war, you can tell when you're at war, but you're not really sure if you're at peace, because there's always something going on. There's always problems somewhere you need to be responding. There's always conflict you need to be managing, deterring, minimizing, ending somewhere. Chasing the Bismarck. Now, Chasing the Bismarck was interesting to me, and these comments really did, give me some interesting ideas. And something I did think through, because you've got Mike Bloor here putting forward the idea of, well, what happens if the Americans are expanding their neutrality zone east and they end up confronting the Bismarck and Prince Eugen? Now, the thing is, you also added, they alerted their presence, or would they have alerted the Army presence, or would the US have launched a strike with US's Wasp to destroy them? Well, the US do a heavy job of making sure the British know exactly what information they need to know to find them, and are helping with that search, so that they don't have to get into that situation. That's one of the reasons why they're doing that in that scenario. So that's sort of being dealt with as it was. And then we have, on top of that, we had Ben Turner's idea here. Thinking about the ending question, that if the Germans had all 4 battleships available, I would say the Prince of Wales would have been sunk with a hood, provided the Battle of Denmark Strait still taking place. I believe the British would have even more outraged, and though I could imagine a lot more casualties being taken by the British, I don't know if the 4 battleships would have made it back to port, unless they had been provided with escorts. But if Prince of Wales had been sunk, I would have wondered what would have happened to Force Z in the Pacific later that year. Well, here's the thing, and this is where Stuart Wald is. I'm going to do his comment, but then I'm going to get a respond myself. The two battleships were sent with destroyers because they were intercepted Bismarck and Prince Jürgen, a known quantity, and the RN already had two cruisers there. With evidence that the Germans were assembling a larger force, the RN would have, one, brought in more capital ships much earlier than they actually did, and two, likely waited to commit its battle groups until they could assemble for mutual support with cruisers maintained in surveillance. While cruisers maintained surveillance? Yes. In fact, I can pretty much tell you exactly what would happen. Okay, so if Sharnwars and Gneisenau haven't done their earlier run out, so they are available to be grouped in together, then what you will have is a 4 being massed. So A, the Royal Air Force are going to be trying to bomb those before they go out to sea, but B, they're going to have to wait on Tirpitz's schedule. So that's going to mean it's going to take place months later. I think you would have found Hood might well have gone in for her refit. I wouldn't be surprised if Duke of York is in service. Hood might have come out of a refit, but also Rodney might have come out of its refit by the point at which they actually come through. Because they're not going for long refits, they're going for refits that can be done as quickly as they can possibly be done. Hood might well have had a refit probably in the UK somewhere. Now, what's the scenario going to be? Well, if they're coming out as a 4 together, the British are going to group together what they can. And that formation is probably, if they're in terms of fast fleet ships, is probably going to be centered around 2 fast carriers, probably Victorious and Ark Royal, because timeline-wise, Ark Royal will probably still be available. And although that could end up stopping her being sunk as she is historically, because she would be available for that, and probably might have also have worked up other ships like Falmouth, like Furious, etc., to actually having an air group. Could well have called up Eagle, which hasn't been sunk yet. And you might well find you have a slow group put around some R-class battleships and Nelson and Rodney. So if you link together Nelson and Rodney with a couple of R-class, maybe more, and you have them with Eagle and Furious as a sort of slower holding group that are with the convoys, because they could probably keep up with a decent sized convoy, then that's a convoy, that's your backstop. And your interception group is going to be a fast group, which is going to be based on probably King George V, Prince of Wales, Duke of York, possibly Hood if she's out of a refit, Renown, Repulse. So that's what you have turning up. You have 2 carriers and you have a full force. And the British will again have cruisers out. So the cruisers will find them. It won't be probably a Denmark straight intercept because they'll probably be because they'll be grouped together, so they'll be watching for where they could come out. So they'll be in a position to intercept them from whichever route they go. Which will mean it'll probably be slightly more in the open sea. But yes, there'll be combined aircraft cruisers tailing the Germans the moment they can. Remember, the British are obsessive, not just about monitoring the content of the German codes and messages, but also the volume of traffic. And they do a lot of traffic analysis to base their work off, and often traffic analysis comes through quicker than they break the actual code. So they would be putting all that together. That's the scenario. And it's actually, I would say, worse for the Germans, because if you've got 3 King George V's, Hood, Renown, Repulse, yes, is going to be one of those which is a fully modified, sort of modernized battle cruiser. One which will probably be a partially modernized, partially refit and fully refitted battle cruiser, and one which will be still in its pre-war post sort of its refits pre-war, but not in massively changed condition. And 3 King George V's, which will have had far more time to work up. Prince of Wales will have worked up fully. Duke of York will probably be the one which may or may not be worked up that well. But there'll still be a group, and there'll be 6 of them. They'll probably act as 2 squadrons jointly operating together. So the King George V's will operate as one squadron, and the battle cruisers as a secondary squadron behind with them. What happens? Your guess is as good as mine, but honestly, 3 King George V's turning up with 30 14-inch guns combined with 20 15-inch guns against 16 15-inch guns and 18 11-inch guns. Considering the ships involved, and it's 4v6, I would say the British have the advantage. Add in the 2 carriers, and the fact that the force will be combined together. Because remember, the British should actually divide. This is the thing that's often forgotten about Denmark. There's King George V and Victorious sitting off covering the other way. They felt that King George V and Victorious alone could deal with this force if they needed to, and they felt that that Hood and Prince of Wales alone could deal with this force. That's what they divided off. But they already have more force available, should they, to have used for this scenario. So you automatically combine those together. You have a different scenario. You also have a different commander. It would have been a major battle, and I have discussed that as an option before. Now, the next scenario is Charles and Eisenhower have done what they did historically and are sitting in French ports. And you try to send out the pair from the French ports to assist the pair coming from the North Atlantic. And you rely on what the French ports have done to get you to sea. I don't think that's a good idea, but I think what you probably have in that scenario then is a bit of a racetrack. What I have a feeling happens in that scenario is if you've got 2 battleships coming out up the top, is the British will probably have, again, they're waiting for Tirpitz, probably again have King George V, Duke of York, Prince of Wales together up north to deal with, to be the force to deal with Tirpitz and Bismarck. They'll probably have them there. Down south, to deal with the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, is probably where you find Renown, Repulse, and Hood. I wouldn't be also surprised if you find with both forces sailing not far away will be a Nelson or Rodney, and a R-class battleship. And the scenario will be this. Fast forces catch you, slow you down, and then these will come in as extra if needed. Now, I don't think they'll be needed for the 3 King George V versus Bismarck and Tirpitz. As good as Bismarck and Tirpitz are in terms of their fire control, etc., and their armouring, which, whilst I do think is inefficient, it is very covering. I think 3 King George V's can probably manage to take them on. And especially with a carrier assisting, because both groups will have a carrier assisting. The Bay of Biscay group, which will be hunting the Scharnhorst Gneisenau, will have Ark Royal. The ones up top will have Victorious. So both will have a carrier with them. Both will be launching strikes. Both will have... And again, it's going to be a very different scenario in that you probably have the British commander from the Battle of Denmark Strait is, of course, Vice Admiral Lancelot Holland. But the force which we will be talking about in this scenario is pretty much Force H, plus add-ons. So it's going to be Admiral Somerville in charge. That's the point here. You're going to have Admiral Somerville in charge of the Bay of Biscay operation. And Somerville is a bit of a throw everything, including the kitchen sink, and is there a plug we can also chuck at them kind of admiral. There is no scenario where he goes, you know what, I'm going to have my cruisers hold off because I'm worried about the firing lines. No, he's going to get the cruiser involved. Besides, his cruiser, which usually goes along with him, is Shiny Chef. It's HMS Sheffield. She's not backing out of any scenario. If any cruiser embodies a tribal class destroyer approach to her opponents, it's Shiny Chef. And in terms of what you would be dealing with above that, in terms of the northern action against Bismarck Terms, it's going to be Admiral Tovey. It's going to be Tovey in charge himself. The guy who was sitting aboard King George V with Victorious and couldn't influence the action because it was taking place far away. So you're going to have very different commanders in charge who are both chuck everything, including the kitchen and sink. We are not going to be focusing. We're not going to, that's their style. This is not to critique Holland. Holland had very good reasons and logic based in his ideas of it. And it was his disagreement with doctrine, but he felt he was right. And you can understand his logic was it was clearing lines of fire and making sure that the battleships were more accurate because they weren't having to distinguish between the 8-inch fire shells, and it meant there was no cross-firing from the cruisers. And I can understand all that. I can understand his theory and his thinking. I don't agree with it, but I can understand it. But the reality is, under any scenario where the Germans are bringing in all four, they are facing a very different mixture. They are facing a reinforced Force H in the Bay of Biscay, and they are facing full home fleet in the North Sea, in the North Atlantic. And in a combined force scenario, Tovey's probably in charge of the whole fleet if they can't wait till the Turbot's ready and come out north together. But you're probably going to find Somerville there as well, because again, his whole force is going to be there. And probably he's in charge of the second force, the second squadron. That's probably how they work it out. So again, it's going to be a very different scenario. And that's one of the things people often, miss when talking through these scenarios. They're putting different ships against different ships, but it's not just the ships which change. It's also going to be the people in charge, because they're going to come with their ships or orient different ships. You're not going to take Force H all the way to fight in this battle and lead Somerville in Gibraltar kicking his heels going, "Oh, what a wonderful day. I'm sitting by the seaside. I'm having fun with my toes in the sand." No, you're not going to do that. Paul Somerville is going to be worked to death, whatever you're going to be doing. That's pretty much what the Royal Navy was doing with him. Okay, so yeah, this was a long one, and I actually wrote a response out of this one and then didn't post it, because this is going to sound terrible. But Hendrik Botha likes to do these long things where he basically accuses me of being anti-Germany. And they get into whole long discussions, and whilst I normally enjoy having discussions with him because he's very respectful, not always the best informed, and I'm really not sure why he keeps getting my name spelt wrong. And does it multiple times. I'm Clarke with an E. I don't mean it in the sort of... I don't want it to come across as me being rude back to you, or etc., but you're very polite in so many other ways. I'm not sure why you're spelling my name wrong when it's right in front of you. It's kind of weird. Looks like it could be interpreted as you being rude, and when I put this in front of one person, they said, "Oh, they're being rude." I went, "No, that's not Hendrik. Hendrik and I disagree on these things, but Hendrik's not rude." So I don't know why you keep getting the Clarke wrong, if you're watching this video. So I did a whole response myself. So to begin with, even Groner, the most German source, and what basically Hendrik has put forward is that, the Germans could have built more these battleships in time, and I've been looking through that, and I've actually got a table which I'm going to get to next. So this is why I'm sort of not reading through the full long document and my full response. So even begin with even Groner, the most pro-German source on these things, and who, to be fair, does have the advantage of having served in the Kaiserliche Marine in World War I and living in Germany during this period, sadly died in 1965 though, has H and J under construction in 1939. H had started in July and had over 5,000 tons of steel delivered to Blanc-Vos, where it was being built, but only 800 tons installed, as the machinery was proving too slow to keep the milling pace required. Time was paused in September. And J had only started in September. As for the others, despite their contracts being awarded in 1959, none had started in a real sense, though I presume you're alluding to the fact um, that the one after J, L, had some of its long lead items ordered as your beginning stages of construction, and there's also discussion over whether M had the same, and there are issues on that, but they were probably starting to make the orders, but the reality is they're having problems with some of the yards. Problem with all the yards you're discussing is not necessarily the size of the yard, but whether the slipway's going to take the weight of the ships you're proposing, and also it's the training of the people who are going to be building the machines and building the ships. Okay, so let me put it this way. When was the last time some of these yards actually built battleships? Had they ever built them before? Did they have anyone experienced in their construction in their service? The answer for many of those scenarios is no, they didn't. And that's a problem. It takes time to train and scale these people up. It takes longer to build them in these yards. And yes, they have some yards which have been building already, but they're maxing those yards out. So now they're going to more yards, which means you need to train up those people. And whereas those other yards had worked on the Deutschen class, then Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, and then Bismarck and Tirpitz, and were now working in the H class, the other yards aren't. So there's a lot of complicated things going on here. And then you have to keep the designs keep changing. The designs keep changing. They keep chomping and changing the designs, even when they build. They do the same with Bismarck and Tirpitz. They do the same with Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. The Germans have a condition where they keep changing their designs, even while they're constructing the ships. And yes, I know others do it, and I know today it's kind of a common condition across the West, but it's not a good idea. Just because some nations do it today does not make it a good idea then or now. Now, I mentioned milling, but you also brought up power plants, and frankly I think that's a good place to start, because a chronic problem for the Germans was not just quality control manufacture of large engines, but also producing them at pace. A legacy of years of not being allowed to produce anything, combined with the attempts to modernise the latest and greatest ideas, some of which were truly ahead of metallurgy of their time, especially in terms of Germany's access to resources. And yes, you can say in peacetime they can buy from the world, but as they found when trying to procure helium from the USA, sometimes nations have good reasons to not be obliging. And now, in terms of the 16-inch guns, again, you keep bringing up the 16-inch guns and going, well, you know, basically, use your quote, the 16.5-inch gun tested for M&N could be used to upgrade the other warships rather easily, because it was basically the same gun, the liner, that had plus 30mm larger inside diameter, and shell weight was close enough for the hoist to be easily modified. Okay, square cube law we'll leave to one side here, but if you're going to rebore something, or you are just going to reduce the thickness of liner, that's going to have an impact on performance. That's going to have an impact on range, because you're having the effect of reducing the caliber, reducing the length ratio, the length to width of the diameter ratio. You're also, with thinning down the liner, you're reducing the liner strength and making it it's going to wear more quickly, and you're going to need to replace it more often. So these are not just easy things to do. Also, you have decided to reinvent their entire engines. You said the complex hybrid power plant would have been quite complex, sure, but it was a design study exploring possibilities. And then you've gone off and designed an entirely new engine system, which was never mentioned with any of those ships ever. I can see why, but you have decided that it has lots of advantages. They should have gone diesel power. And the thing is, they might have done, but that's not on their plans. So what you have done is invented a wholly new ship, which you are using to try and make the argument. That doesn't really work when you're having a historical argument to invent a wholly new ship. If you're discussing an alternate history, what would have been a better policy for them, I will agree. I've done videos on this channel about a diesel Kriegsmarine, and I have said it would have been far more sensible for them to push more of the diesel, especially diesel electric. But they didn't. You've also said oversized turrets, sliding breech and loose liner barrels were much more adaptable to auto or semi-auto loading. But they weren't working on that. Yes, people have written about how they could have done, but when you look in the actual studies and actually what they're working on, They're not working on that. So again, it's something you're adding in. And you want to go back and change the guns around? Oh, no. If you want to, that's fine, but that's not going to be a good scenario for you. And you've added in for the 11 guns on Nice and Shanos is also political. We should have got. You should have gone with 6 Japanese 16.1s rather than the Italian ones. No, the 11 inches. It is political in that they want them to be domestically produced, but they're the only ones they could have. Now let's get into the yard scenario because you want to produce more ships. Okay. Well, let's use the maths which I use when I'm looking at. I'm looking at the yards, and the first thing you'll notice is that the Kriegsmarine Werft Wilhelmshaven lay down the Scharnhorst on the 15th of June, 1935, and she's commissioned on the 7th of January, 1939. And as we know, the Germans commissioned before they've completed the testing. So, for her, that's been 3 years, let's be honest, roughly 6 months, will be nice, 3.5 years, from laying down to commissioning. And she's not ready for combat, really, then. Gneisenau, 6th of May 1935 to the 21st of May 1938. Ooh. Well, that's 3 years dead on. A little bit, okay, there's a couple of weeks involved, but it's 3 years. And again, she's commissioned, but she's not ready for work. So that's 3 years, 3.5 years. Okay, Scharnhorst Gneisenau. Bismarck. 1st July 1936, commissioned 24th August 1940. Okay, so that's roughly 4 years, 1 month. And then we can also bring in Tirpitz on this, which is November 1936 till February 1941. Which is 4 years, 3 months. Now, if we are generous and say that Bismarck is close to the peacetime, is probably peacetime level construction, let's be honest what's going on. Tirpitz is delayed by the war effort, so we will not sort of go, oh, this is on them, that's 4 years, 3 months. We've got roughly 4 years, 3.5 years, and 3 years. And these are smaller ships than what the Germans are planning on building, without the pressures of rearming the rest of their industry, which is also growing, and the rest of their systems are going, and there are economic issues which are well known and often used as an excuse of, well, they had to go to war then because their economy required them to go to war then because they couldn't sustain it otherwise. All those issues built in, I would say, reckoning roughly 3.5+ years to build each pair of ships, isn't bad. Now, your point, if I look at it, and I'm just checking it, Hendrik, is I don't know why Clarke insists they would only be able to build 2 at a time. And you think they'd all be finished by 43 to 45. Well, they're starting off, they've got 2 starting in 1939, are actually laid down. And considering the others all had stuff bought before them as well, that doesn't never here nor there. They're bigger ships, but they're laid down. So they've got 2 laid down in 39. 3.5 years on from them. We're probably talking for the H 1943, and definitely for the J 1943. She's in service. For the K&L, let's say they're laid down. Let's say they lay down lots of these. Remember, they're also organising the Schlachtcruiser, the battle cruiser. They've ordered the Q, not O or P, despite it being the O class. They ordered Q from the German Werft in August 39. So they're planning on building those 4 ships pretty much simultaneously, at least, and possibly 2 more. And they're growing bigger, and there's all sorts of ideas for them. This is where you get the problem. You want to add more onto this. These will already take till at least 1943. You're starting these a year after. They're going to be started in 1940. So that's 1944, and that's if you can get all four built at the same time. And realistically, look at the yards which are coming up. Yes, you've got Deichmann, but what point are they going to be free? It's after they've launched the ship. They might be able to start another one. If we consider again, if we go back to Kriegsmarine Werft, who built both Scharnhorst and Tirpitz, well, they launched Scharnhorst in October 1936 and started on Tirpitz in November 1936, a month later. A little under a month, okay, 1 day less than a month, but pretty much a month later. So you need roughly at least a month. But that's a fair number of months as well, and let's be honest, Scharnhorst is the one which ends up taking longer to build than Gneisenau, and arguably that's because she had to be rushed. Because Gneisenau starts in May 1935 and isn't launched till December 1936. So, think about that. She gets an extra 3 months. And she commissions a whole lot earlier. A whole lot earlier. So you don't want to... The more complex the ship is, the worse that happens if you launch before you should launch in the design. So you can't launch H&J early. And they are not going to be small builds. They are large vessels. The H-class are planned to be large ships. So by 1945, do I honestly expect them to have more than 6 ships in service? No. Because of the likelihood of the German system. And the way they keep changing things around. I'm thinking they're going to be at least 3.5 to 4 years to build. At least. And remember, they are bigger and more complicated than Bismarck and Tirpitz were. Which means they could actually take longer. And whilst Blom and Voss is a yard that has built the Bismarck, to transition from the Bismarck to the H took them from Valentine's Day 1939 to the 15th of July. 5 months to transition between the two. Deichmann haven't built something of that size in that complexity of warship in a very long time at this point. Neither is Germania Werft. So, and we know the Schlachtcruiser O and the Schlachtcruiser P were planned for Deutschwerk and Kriegsmarine Wilhelmshaven. So they're going to be delayed. So these two cannot be started until their probable battleships get through. So, when you're looking at the likely time to complete, yes, there is a possibility they get them through. There is a possibility they get more ships through. It's not an impossible task. But it's a very unlikely task considering the other conditions they have going on and the mission creep that all their designs work through. So, building 2 at a time? Okay, maybe they can push it up to 4. But there's also the other problem. Maybe they do push it up to 4 and they do get 4 laid down in the following year. But there's a reason they didn't lay 4 down in 1939. Because they don't yet have the yards at the ability to do that. Because of the training of the work, the supply of the infrastructure industry, and most importantly because of the number of skilled people they need to do it. And because of the rate of production elsewhere in the supply chain. And the yards are still being stressed for it. Deichmann is still being worked on. Now, you do also bring up other yards which could have been improved, and you talk about Halsworth work, and they could have been. There was a design study for them, and Yeah, that could also work, but that would have taken work to get that yard ready, and then you'd have to train up the people. It's not just the physical thing of the yard. When I'm talking about yard, you are not just talking about the physical infrastructure, you also talk about the people and all of that system and the systems to sustain it. And also, if you use that yard for building H class, what is it not building instead? This is the other problem with the scenario with the H class. It's what else are you not building? What else are you not doing? What else is not being done because your resources are going to that? Now, it's at this point which I'm going to bring up a further discussion of something I've already mentioned. Because, to be fair, when you were discussing and putting in the different power plants, you did point out before that many concepts of the proposed class were also considered tested. Considered, I would say, not tested. The electrical drive was evaluated and would have given more top speed, but added weight. And you then again, and I don't know why you keep making this quite so personal through this comment on me. And again, if you're making it personal, dropping the E, why? Clarke is without an E means someone who can write in British historical terminology for names. Clarke with an E meant warrior who could write. Broadly speaking. Okay, broadly speaking, yes. People are going to go, but if it's this spelling as that, yeah. Okay, fine. There are various spelling. But throughout my family history, the reason we've kept the E is we've always kept to that mantra. And you find out. And other families have dropped the E, picked up the E, and all sorts of things at various points. It's fun, but my family kept the E because, right, and this actually led to fun for me at school. We'll leave that to a story to another time. Now, you've pointed out they're sort of doing some testing. One of the reasons why they don't pursue that further is actually a very sensible thing. Because at the moment they've put all their effort into the high-powered steam plants and pushing them. If you decide to go down that route, you're not going to simplify things. You're not going to make things quicker. You're going to make things take longer because you're going to have to develop it, test it, and test it on full-size models. You're going to have to implement it. You're going to have to train crew to new systems. You're going to have to make sure all these systems work. And you're also going to have to develop the material to build it and the infrastructure to build that at the volume you need it built for all these things. That's all going to add time. You've got the steam plants going. Hendrik, I love your attention to history, and I think this comes from a place of wanting to see the history properly served. And I have to admit, in certain videos, sometimes I do bypass bits because they're not part of the area I'm discussing, and if I get into them, that's going to be a completely added on extra video to explain that bit. But that's why I like Scuttlebutt, because I get to do these long discussions of your comments and get into those bits. So this is why I'm quite appreciative of the comment, despite you keep getting the Clarke wrong. Have I mentioned that enough times yet to say that the Clarke getting wrong is really causes me fun? Because there is someone who reads the comments on my channel who is very annoyed every time my name is misused. It's not me. It's the person who in the family who used to have arguments with my schools when they got the name wrong. Okay? And then I get to hear about it. So, it's one thing to be annoyed with me, disagree with me, Hendrik. It's another thing to annoy my mother. It seems a bit... I know my family is unusually close and does all sorts of things, but that's just the way we are. We've had to be that way in some regards. In other regards, it's just the family history. We're always taught up to sort of be part of the family. Family first before everything else. It's a strong mantra in my family. Anyway, you want to... Now, I've said... you've put forward that I said that the electrical generations would be slurred and gearboxes and shafts. I don't think I said that. I think it would be slurred to produce. Now, it actually could be slower in some regards. and this is going to sound strange, okay? The gearbox's shafts are direct power, taking power directly from the turbines, straight into it. So you lose a lot less energy, especially with the technology available at this time. It's not the technology we have today, it's the technology they have available then. With conversion to electricity, and by the turbine system, because you have a turbine powering usually a generator, which might be a geared generator to try and get the best, but usually it's a constant generator, and you spin it up too, so you can get a constant energy flow, and then you apply that power where you need to, and then you have to transmit that power over the energy lines through the systems, and then it has to be converted by an electrical motor to power driving a probably shortened shaft and propeller. Now, this does have advantages. Damage control, all sorts of things, it has advantages in. But also, it's a system you have to get right. Because if you get it wrong, you are going to muck your ship up. And in terms of slower versus faster, it can actually be slower because in terms of its responsiveness, because you've not got a direct response from the engine to the power, to the propeller. You haven't got that direct link. It's an indirect link. Goes via other mediums. It's not a direct connection of gearbox to shaft to propeller. Very straight line, boom, mechanical line, power, straight in. No, it's a different system. And it's the modern system. We do it. The Queen Elizabeth class aircraft carriers are completely electric. But that's been being developed for a long time to get the progress to the level we have it today. It's not necessarily the level available then. And again, that's going to be more funding. And where is the money going to come from, and the resources to do all that development research going to come from? That's the other problem. All the other extra benefits and extra things you're talking about require more money. Where's it going to come from? Now, yes, the V12Z diesel engines developed the O class could have been used. They could have been used. It's just they haven't yet been used. And are you going to place all your eggs in one basket? Can you produce enough of them? Can your factories produce enough of them? Can you adjust the designs to go with them? And are they going to produce what you need? Possibly. Possibly not. Because at the point, no one's tested them. You've tested the steam plants. You've tested the steam plants as you've grown these ships. You've got them actually in service. Again, I can understand your passion, but I think you are, Hendrik, pushing rather hard on this door. The more changes you make to the ship's designs, the more things you change from what is to an extent becoming their conventional methodology, the longer those productions are going to take. So actually, you want those ships to be as close to a Bismarck class as possible if you want them to be built more quickly. You want them to be a scaled up Bismarck, pretty much. That's the choice you want to make if you want to build them quickly. Any changes you introduce are going to extend their construction time. And they're already bigger, so they already should probably take a bit longer to build. Because it's not as if Germany at this point had a glut of extra workers going around that were highly trained for the shipyards and they could deploy to the shipyards at will. They had all their industries running red hot. And when I say red hot, I mean fully employed and staffed, but running roughly 2 shifts a day. It took them a long time to get to a 3-shift system in wartime. In peacetime, they're even more of a... Let's put it this way. Nazi Germany was not good at organising its preparations for war. They had a lot of interesting ideas. They had a lot of competing bureaucracy. And that was the big problem with getting these things built. So, next one, 96831. This feels strange. It's taken us this long to get to you. But it's actually an interesting scenario here, because the video was published on the 17th of February 2024. The comment was from the 20th of May 2024. And you actually put it, yeah, in an environment where you have 5 F3 nail rods running around, the British Empire is the real winner, because now they have 8 fast capital ships, means the battlecruiser force can be better used and maintained. In the grand scheme of things, those extra 5 fast capital ships benefit Hood more than Renown and Repulse, as Hood will still be the largest ship in the fleet, but now with 5 extra capital ships, some of her workload can be shared or taken off, meaning she's far better shape come the late 1930s and World War II. Now, the idea was basically that these would be 28-knot ships. This is the 28-knot design for a nail rod, okay? Basically, it's with less armour than nail rods had historically. But the thing is, under the Tillman scenario I was talking about, the tonnage amount for ships gets raised. There are reasons for it in the Tillman, the Washington Naval Treaty. Senator Tillman, as we all know, was obsessed with building big ships. More importantly, he was obsessed with getting ships built in his home state, because that's how he secured votes. And if ships were a shipbuilding holiday was not what he wanted cruisers being built, and he would want capital ships being built because he would want them still constructed, as they benefit Democrat seats. So yeah, basically he would push for those to still be being built because Democrat seats. That's the important thing to Tillman. Not international strategy, not international politics. It's simple seats. He is a despicable character in many, many ways. Please don't get me wrong. I don't want to sing his praises. But he is quite fundamentally focused on the Democrat Party having the most seats possible, and he doesn't like anything which gets in that way. So he sees ship construction as a job creation and therefore vote buying scheme. That's it. It's that plain and simple. So under this scenario, the British would have had slightly more space to build these ships, and slightly more tonnage. Now, the thing is, you could get the 16-inch guns, you could get the thickness of armour of the nail rods on a 28-inch design if you have an extra 5,000 tons. Well, if you've got a limit of 40,000 tons and you build them on 38,000 tons, you could have got... the Royal Navy could have got 5 of these. And I found that quite an attractive scenario, because the Royal Navy getting 5 of these ships with 16-inch guns is very nice for the Royal Navy. With Hood, that counts as their allocation of 6 16-inch gun ships. Britain and America are both allowed 6. And yeah, that would have worked for the Royal Navy. It would have also made things incredibly different come World War II, because you'd have had the Royal Navy having as its baseline 5 fast battleships, armoured to the same level as Nelson and Rodney, with 9 16-inch guns. So 28-knot ships with 9 16-inch guns. That changes the Battle of Denmark Straits. That changes a lot of scenarios, because, let's be honest, the British will have done their best to keep them to 28-knot ships and probably push them a little bit faster. Again, there is how fast can we do if we are maintaining our engine integrity? How fast can we do if we don't care because we're going to be taking these ships into a major refit and it's an emergency? There is a difference in that. full power, disregarding the fact that this is going to really wreck the engines long term, because we only need them to work short term and then get us home, because after that this ship's going into refit. A 28 knot ship can do an impressive speed at that point. So yes, I think you have an interesting scenario under that front, and I think that was to me a very interesting. What was interesting to me was how it ended up approaching almost the Equitable Treaty, and I didn't really realize how it did, but it did approach the Equitable Treaty in many ways because of how Tillman would have influenced things and how he would have worked on things, and how he perceived things. It was a very interesting hour and 43-minute long video in my mind. And the link below that I have to the fundraising for the ship-shaped trip is the link below that is the link to this video, because, well, actually no, it won't be a link below that. I won't put a link in. I'll put a card in above my head now, and that will be the link. I hope you like that. Right then, next thing. Now this is not really a comment I had to respond to, but I wanted to do this to you all anyway. Because, well, our good friend, my recreational channel 7181 did this to me. I've always thought Good for Lucians looks like John Cena in that photo. I found, I think, the correct photo. I found a photo of John Cena. I now cannot unsee it either, Scoot155. And so I didn't think any of you should be able to unsee it either. If we need to do a new Bismarck movie, I nominate John Cena to play Gunther Lutyens. He will have probably a terrible accent. He will probably have the woefully different wrong body shape, but you cannot be denied that the ears and the nose and a lot of the facial shaping is incredibly similar. It's worryingly similar. If you can find better photos of how alike they look, please do start posting links below. I would love to see them. Then we have a very recent discussion, because this is actually, I'm recording this on the 29th of May, and, well, 29th, 30th of May, overnight, and this is actually happening. I think I have Wednesday the 30th of May out there. I put it on the 30th of May because I knew it was going to be a recording overnight, but I left it Wednesday instead of Thursday. Sorry. It's confusing everyone. But yeah, I had this interesting comment about Japanese folding wings. And a whole discussion led from it. And the discussion's interesting, but again, it comes back to sort of Japanese doctrine vis-a-vis their fighters. The commentator, and I'm going to make sure I get their name right because they haven't commented much before, so I want to make sure I get the name right. There are some who I can literally rattle off their name just because I recognize them, but others I have to go and check. Tom Dolan, 9761, I think. Yes, Tom Dolan, 9761. Basically wrote this. Now, I will say they clarified it later to me fighters after I pointed out that it wasn't as fighters, but it started this off and started the discussion. The Japanese never developed a folding wing, which was instrumental in increasing the effective air grip on the American British carriers. They also stripped their carriers' complements of experienced naval aiders while failing to properly use that experience in expanding their training cadre. Well, they basically stripped their carrier complements of experienced naval aiders by them dying off in operations because they kept using them and didn't have any trickle crewing system. But the interesting point was the Japanese never developed a folding wing. And now I did respond and correct and include in this pointed out the fact that the Kates and our systems did have folding wings. They have what's called a simple fold. And it then came sort of a focus on the fighters, and they're not having a fold. And of course, the reason they don't have a fold is because the way the Japanese want the wings to work, because of the way they want the fighters to work. And without the amount of aluminium and other systems, other supplies and resources to be able to use, they have to go with the wing shaping they can go, the wing shaping and form they can go with. And it's an interesting discussion and point to think about, because the Japanese have limitations. They truly do. They truly do. But that doesn't necessarily mean they make bad decisions. For them, the folding wings were a nice thing to have. And was something they wanted to have, but couldn't fit with the other decisions they made. It's a choice. For the British, folding wings were a necessity. When you're going with especially the armoured carrier designs, because of their desire to protect their air group, because of the likely operator, their theory about their operations of fleet carriers, of how close they're going to be to their fleets, and scenarios not just in the Mediterranean, but also South China Sea and other scenarios where they knew the enemy were going to try and hit them, and they knew carriers were vulnerable. And pre-radar, they felt, well, we can't, no amount of aircraft can guarantee their security, so we'll go with an armouring scenario. The Americans and Japanese both went with the larger air group scenario. In the end, it comes down to, by the end of the war, everyone who's free from treaty is basically going for a combination of the armouring, strengthening, heavily protecting the carrier scenario and large air group, because they don't have the treaty system forcing that artificial limitation and making them make a choice. They know that the best way is to go for the combination of it all, but the treaty system doesn't allow you to go for a combination of it all. And the British look at the South China Sea, and they look at the Mediterranean, and they go, we can't sink the enemy aircraft carriers in those waters, so we better make sure our carriers are as survivable as possible. Because you can't. You can't sink the enemy carriers in those scenarios. They're islands. They're bases ashore in the mainland. That they're not really able to be sunk. It's annoying. It's completely unfair, but it's the way it is. So the IJN carrier doctrine featured into the sort of the story. This was on the Shikaku class video. It's an interesting comment to have. But again, the folding wing things, the amount of times I hear variations of the Japanese didn't have folding wings, but they did. They just didn't apply them universally. And you can argue the toss of that. And frankly, you can argue that their experiences and their doctrinal development and how they developed their fighters in terms of their exercises had yielded so many false positives they'd gone down a route which was not necessarily a sensible route to go down. And I would agree with you. I would agree 100% that rather like the British with the 4.7-inch dual-purpose gun, which was not capable of high-angle fire for their destroyers, etc., their exercises and their limited warfighting experience in China had led them down a route which looked sensible, but was a false positive at the time. If we consider how modern fighter aircraft were designed for many years, and still are, and look at some of the principles that guide their design, and the principles that were guiding the Japanese design, there's a lot of similarity going on there. So, yeah, things come back around. Okay, when this video goes live, it's supposed to be after Carriers of the Warfleet. It should be on the 5th of June. So that should be underlined. But the next week should be damage control, when it went wrong and when it went right, which I'm going to re-record at some point before we move, because I don't like it. And the Imperial Japanese Naval Aircraft Squadron System is also going to be re-recorded, because again, I don't like that video. And I should like that video. And I'm probably going to re-record War Emergency Ships and Bogue Ruler Attacker Class, because I'm in that kind of mood. But honestly, those two could end up getting recorded in hotel rooms. Re-recorded in hotel rooms. Or they might not. It's going to depend if we raise enough money for me to actually go away with the shipshape crew. Fingers crossed. And thank you very much everyone for your support. With that being said though, for those who've watched this video so far, I have a special treat for you, because I have another one. This was from the Kriegsmarines, or slash Kaiserlich Marines, Nightmare returns. The RN finds some 1910 town class in a couch. Now, this was, of course, a patron suggestion. It was also a bit of an off-the-wall alternate history and a bit of fun. I don't really think it's serious when you're saying the RN finds some town class in a couch. I'd say that's the first clue, if not the fact that Nightmare returns. But no, Anony Museum, or rather Anonymusum, Anonymusum, Anonymusum? I think that's right. Points out it's Kriegsmarine, not Kriegsmarine, i.e., I'd got the E before the I rather than the I before the E. I'm sorry, I'm human. But they go further. An academic shouldn't make this kind of mistakes. Again, human. Sorry. Secondly, there wasn't a specific class of ships the German Navy was afraid of. Instead, it was the entire Royal Navy. At the outbreak of World War II, Admiral Raeder said, the German Navy can only show how to die honourably. So many of these admirals have quotes which go around saying they're just predicting they're going to die. You know, there's Mitsumasa Yonai's quote where, you know, they'll win the first battle, they'll lose the second, and all sorts of things go around. It's an amazing bit of history to find. But leaving that to one side, my response was, as I do like to consider that act honorary, I'll say thank you. I hadn't realised that I'd twisted my eye. Joy of being mortal. Doesn't matter if you have a PhD or not, you're still human. That's the point. Honestly, I've had, over the years, several times I've had comments from people telling me when I have spelling mistakes, and I always say thank you. When you add in a line like, an academic shouldn't make this kind of mistake, I do wonder what kind of pedestal you're putting academics on. We're not worthy of that pedestal. We're still human. Any time someone says something like that to me, I'm still looking at them and going, what do you think happens when we get our cap and gown? Do you think we get anointed by God and suddenly we're omniscient? No, we're not. We're still humans. Very much humans. And very much still sometimes terrible at typing. And will sometimes make spelling mistakes. And as I've made no bones before, no bones before, it's definitely not something I'm leaning on to hide things, but I'm completely honest, I have dyslexia. And that's always fun with words. And the words I use more often are the ones I get worse, because when I read them, I automatically read them pretty much as correct, which is why I use so many editors, etc. when I'm producing books, why I get people to proofread them for me. My friend Sam, I tend to basically buy a lot of Chinese dinners for. Take her out to a nice restaurant, and thank you. And by the way, here's the latest copy of my book. Go read it. I do similar things with my mum. I buy her a dinner and say, thank you, here's a copy of the book. I've got a couple of friends who are on that sort of rate of, I buy food, you read through my book. It's a going thing within our friendship group. And then even once that's happened, when it goes to the publishers, they have editors who read through it. They have people go through it. Now, that can lead to all sorts of fun issues in them. It can. But usually it's okay. Usually it's good. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you enjoyed where Scuttlebutt's going, and any comments, please, on how to improve it. All welcomed. All greatly welcomed. And again, as I said, thank you to all the commenters, people who've commented, and who I've been able to respond to. Yeah. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you for all your support.